to Nancy for her wonderful program. Thank you. Well, thank you, Bonnie. That was a more than nice introduction. Okay, so we're talking about the sewing machine. So this is my official first sewing machine. My grandmother bought this for me when I graduated from high school. And I bought another one in the 90s that was more advanced. This is a mechanical machine. It had cams. It was not electronic. And it went with me everywhere. It went with me to college. It went with me everywhere we lived after we got married. It made a lot of clothes, and it was a workhorse. And I was just heartbroken when it had a fatal flaw that where the cam goes in the back that regulates the stitch, and you change them for different stitches. It couldn't be fixed. So I labeled it, and I took it to school, and I used it as a doorstop. Flossie was a cement poodle that I'd had as a doorstop before, and she kind of got tripped on and everything, and her ear broke off, and then her nose broke off. And so I took this up there, and it made for great conversations, I'll tell you that. But this one, I still have it. It's kind of like Tim's old cow, Robin. He just couldn't sell her. She was going to die on the farm. Just in case you wonder, there is a lot of interest in vintage sewing machine. This is Bernadette Banner. She started out in costume theater, and then she got her master's at the London School of Historical Costume. And when she got done, it was a master's, she found there wasn't much of a job possibility of it. So she started a YouTube channel. And she sews everything on old sewing machines. She uses old methods. She wears these costumes. There's even a picture of her riding one of those 1900s big wheel bikes in one of her costumes. She has 2 million followers on her videos. And it's just huge interest. And so, just so you know, the interest is out there. So we're just going to start out with the great unsolved mystery of the 19th century. Who invented the sewing machine? Now you would think it'd be easy. Does anybody know? No? Okay. All right. How is credited with it? But it is a long and convoluted story. So we're just going to start out. A lot of information came from the International Sewing Machine Collectors Society. And it's a huge worth of information. It has links to everything, including a lot of machine serial numbers to find out when they were actually made. And this next part is going to be a summary of a speech given by Graham Forsdyke. He is professor at Kent State University. And it's just a really nice speech. And his first line of the speech is, "We are gathered here today to resolve one of the great unsolved mysteries of the 19th century. Who invented the sewing machine?" And also asked ourselves, who gives a damn? And I forgot it at home, but I printed it all, of course, and highlighted it for this. And it's a long, I would probably be enthralled from beginning to end. But in order to start this, we have to know what they were trying to accomplish. So there were basically 3 main stitches and 1 modified. One is the running stitch, which you've probably all done at some point. And I'm going to pass around samples. But this was it's the quilting stitch. It was just a basic stitch. And the advantage of this stitch is that it's quick, it's easy, and you can pull it to gather it. And this is what they would use to do gathers, because there's a lot of gathers in those Civil War dresses, let me tell you. But one of the downsides is the same thing. You pull it, and it all gathers. And if you would happen to catch these stitches in your skirt or your hem, we all know what happens then, right? So I'm going to pass these around as we go. So this is not ideal, and they would use smaller stitches, obviously. So the next one would be the back stitch. And you've probably done back stitches, and it goes 2 stitch forwards, 1 back, 2 stitch forwards, 1 back, all the way through. Now this is an extremely sturdy hem. It has a little bit of give, so that if you would get your skirt caught on something, it would give a little. With that one, it could possibly rip out. This could rip too. And the advantages of it is, it's extremely strong. So how many of you have been somewhere and you've ripped that corner of your crotch out? and that second row of stitching held it together, but it still looks not good? Well, I used to use this stitch to fix those, because it's happened to me in places where I really didn't want it to happen. So anyway, that is the back stitch. Extremely sturdy, but it's impossible to rip out without a razor blade or a seam ripper. Tailors use razor blades for ripping. Okay, then we have, this was the best diagram I could find, even if it's in German, is the modified back stitch. And you can't really see these, but you would go forward 5 or 6, 10 stitches and do 1 back stitch. So that prevented it from pulling a long ways. It was easier to rip out, and it was just a better quality stitch to use. And then we have the whip stitch. And those can be used for rolled hems. It can be used for just, and I did this one time, I finished my seams with just a whip stitch on the edge. It was a sturdy fabric like wool. And it's used on hems. And if you combine a little bit of a lock stitch with the whip stitch and you hide it in the hem, you can make a pretty much invisible hem that if you get your heel caught, which, yes, it's happened to me too, doesn't pull the whole hem, it doesn't rip it out or anything, it just stays there. So on this whip stitch, I've never done a rolled hem by hand. Sergers were made for that. So don't judge. So what the machine was trying to do, it was trying to emulate these stitches. Okay, so think about in your mind, how would you do this? I just really don't know. So you have to have a needle that goes through the fabric. You have to have something to hold the fabric to pull it back and forth. And you have to have a machine that pushes the needle through the fabric. Some of the problems to solve are the stitch needs to be tight, because you can't have it wavy or else it just pulls apart. The needle needs, or somehow you have to go in reverse. Okay? And those are 2 of the challenges that provided the most challenge for people. So in 1755, now this is before the Revolutionary War, right? They solved the first problem with a 2-pointed needle. Charles Wiesenthal in Germany, a German mechanic in London. He had 2 pincers like, crab legs or whatever, that shuttled the fabric through. But it still didn't solve the tightening issue of the thread. And he experimented, but it wasn't significant enough to go anywhere, so that was dropped. In 1790, Thomas Saint was in England, and he was a cabinet maker who loved to invent things. He realized that the thread may not have to go all the way through the fabric to make a stitch. And he patented this invention, almost changed the course of history. I forgot my pointer. Okay, so he almost changed the course of history. But the British Patent Office took piles of patents and just shoved them into piles and put them in books. Because they were either lazy or in a hurry or had too many, or they just didn't care. And it was accidentally filed under glue and found 100 years later too late to make any money. Okay, but this was really probably the first serious, well, the story goes on. So in 1842, John Greenough in Boston, he was highly educated in all areas. And he came up with this two-pointed needle with a central hole for the thread. That works. Okay, so you got a central hole there, and it's going back and forth, and these pincers hold it, and it goes back and forth. But it still didn't tighten the thread. So he filed a patent in 1842. He let it sit until 1850, until it was about to expire, and then he sold the engraving for $500 and made $100 million for other people. Yeah. So in 1800, we have Balthasar Krems in Germany, and he found a method for turning up edges, and he developed a machine with a tambour needle. And a tambour needle is a curved needle. It's often used for beading today, but it had a very limited use. There's no patent, and only one exists today, and it's in a museum in Europe, I believe, probably Germany. And we're unsure of the date of that particular machine. So in 1830, Barthélemy Thimonier from France developed a usable machine that sewed a chain stitch. Now, a chain stitch, well, I'll talk about that in a little bit. He made 80 machines, and he started a factory, and he was making uniforms for the French Revolution. Well, the tailors didn't like that. And I think this was a factor all the way through all of this invention. They were afraid they were going to lose their jobs. So they formed a mob, and they stormed his factory, threw all the machines on a pile, and burned it. He was lucky to escape with his life. And by the time he could perfect his machine and got back to it, got settled somewhere else, other people were way ahead of him. So in 1844, Elias Howe created this new machine that would not sell in America or Britain. He was the one who came up with the eye at the pointed end of the needle. And I just have some needles here. You can look at sewing machines if you aren't familiar with them. But this is more of a modern one, and looking at it, it's probably a denim needle. It's a really big needle. It's too big for normal sewing today, but works well for denim. So you can, they're sophisticated these days. So his brother-in-law took it, and he had some investors in London. It didn't sell in America. Tried to sell it in England, and he couldn't sell it. Now, we don't know if it was poor marketing or he was taken to the cleaners on this, but at any rate, at one point he went to England to help sell it. And it didn't sell, so he ended up penniless. So this is where probably a little bit of fraud and shenanigans happened. And so he had to get regular jobs, working in stables and things like that. And he finally had enough money to come back to the U.S. Well, when he got back, he found out that other companies were using parts of his patent. And so he did the American thing. He sued. So, Isaac Merritt Singer had patented a sewing machine in 1851. Now, Isaac Merritt Singer was a marketing genius, and you may have heard that already. He was an actor and he was a showman. He demonstrated at social gatherings, and of course he could really play it. He was down and out poor before he found this. He didn't know anything about sewing, but he recognized a good thing when he saw it. So he was the first person to market directly to housewives. The key was there. He was the first to have an installment plan, $1 down, $1 a week. So if you think about all these car payments this day, you can blame Isaac Singer, as far as I can tell. He was an aggressive salesman. He would have shows in homes and parties. He'd have parties to do this. He'd have, at the World's Fair especially, he had female demonstrators, beautiful models doing this to show that it was easy to use, which probably was translated into, even women can do it. Right? Right. And another thing that he did in his marketing was you could trade your Singer in for a new one, but he destroyed them. So you could not buy a used Singer, which kept him in the market for new machines all the time, and he made more money that way. You could buy one from your neighbor, but as you're going to find out, these machines were made to last. Okay, so I took this out, but I think you guys will get a charge out of this one. Isaac Merritt Singer was a dandy. He was good looking, he was charming, he was a poor traveling actor, and a promiscuous womanizer. He had married or common law wives and had 5 families with 20 to 24 children. His son took over the company, and the company asked him to leave the country. And he tried to come back several years later and had a party, and no one came. So he could not clean up his reputation. So, and look at him. He has that look, doesn't he? That face could sell 1,000 salesmen. Anyway, the patent battle. Howe came back from England and found that companies were using his patent of 1851. And he sued them all. Most of the companies simply paid royalties or patent infringement fees or judgments. Some slipped away and started making machines under the table. That's why we find so many unmarked older machines, vintage machines from that time period, because they didn't want to be traced back and be sued. But Singer fought back on the grounds that the shuttle system existed earlier, which it did. So, Singer's lawyers had detected that searched for the earlier patent in England. It was there, but in 1840, this was the patent, Fisher and Gibbons filed a patent 27 days before Howe did. So, and they said, it exists, we know it exists, we're going to find it. He was the one who developed the eye-pointed needle that's going around, and the shuttle, which we'll talk about. And there were 3 patent offices in England, and I alluded to this before. So the detectives checked the closest patent to where the machine was manufactured, and it wasn't there. So they kind of gave up. They didn't go check the other 2 locations. But in 1992, they found that patent in one of the other locations. And when they were putting it all on microfiche. So shoddy detective work and incompetent patent officials who didn't share it in all the offices changed the course of history forever. Well, Singer lost that lawsuit, and they paid Howe millions. So Howe's patent reigned supreme. So this is a case of to the victor go the spoils. Singer became the 2nd richest man in America right before the oil tycoons came on. Rockefeller, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan was in there, and all the railroads started coming. But there were still problems. There were no feed dogs, and the feed dogs are those little teeth on the bottom that pull the fabric through. So you couldn't do more than 6 stitches at a time, and you couldn't sew in a curve. And you know, that was a basic thing with sleeves. Sleeves being the main one, and then all the curves on the waist of all those lovely dresses. So this is what Howe's patent looked like, or one of them. So all these people were fighting, they were suing each other, they weren't getting anywhere, they were just basically paying each other money because there were 3 basic patents. So Wheeler and Wilson had a patent for a decent feed mechanism, the feed dogs on the bottom. Singer had the patent for a needle moving up and down over a work plate. Howe had the patent for the transverse shuttle and the eye-pointed needle. And Grover and Baker were just in it because they came up with the idea of getting together. So they formed a cartel. And they pooled their patents to stop the infighting and the patent infringements. So they created a monopoly that controlled the sewing machine industry for 14 years. Of course, the largest of them being Singer. And this dissolved when the patent expired in 1877. Then there was no point. So that's how the sewing machine came to be as we know it. I think a lot of it has to do with tailors not wanting to lose their jobs and the fact that women could do the work at home. I think those 2 things figured into the reluctance in the beginning. So there's 3 types of mechanisms. Actually, there's a 4th, the chain stitch, but these are the big 3. Well, this is the chain stitch. Now the straight chain stitch had this little hook here that would come down, it would loop it and it would bring the needle through it. So you know what a chain stitch looks like? If you did any kind of embroidery, this is one of the stitches. And what's the biggest disadvantage of the chain stitch? You've probably seen it in your pants on the early serging machines that did your pants. You pull one string and it all comes out. Now, the chain stitch is still widely used in feed sacks. We have a chain stitch machine at the seed house, and you pull one string and the whole top comes out, if you find the right string. I'm not very good at that, but I don't have to be. So then we have the transverse shuttle, and this was Elias Howe. And what it did was the needle came down and the shuttle went back and forth straight. And it came through and it formed a stitch. It imitates the loom on a hand-woven loom. It utilizes 2 threads. There's a little bobbin in that shuttle. And it produces a lock stitch. And it's featured in the new family machine. But it became outdated eventually because there was new inventions. That being the vibrating shuttle machine. I made this little tape on one of the machines I have at home. It was developed in 1850 by Alan Wilson. And the threads interlock. It looks more like a little twist right here. And it was continued use until the 1960s. They still made these machines. The Singer Bullet shuttle featured an exposed bobbin. You can't really see it on that one. It must be exposed on the bottom because you have to pull the thread off of it. It oscillates in an arc motion. As opposed to going straight back and forth, it's an arc. And underneath the machine it's over here, and it just goes back and forth as the treadle goes on the bottom. Let's take a look at this. I thought you should be able to hear sound, but that one doesn't, it's not showing sound. Okay, so then the next one is the one we basically use today, is the rotary hook. The needle comes down, and I'm sure you've all watched it as you run the hand wheel, and it hooks it and brings it around. And it forms a different kind of stitch with the looping up and down here. And that's more secure. It's a little less bulky. The bobbins are sleek. So those are your basic 3 mechanisms. So now we're going to show you some of the machines in the museum, and a couple that aren't. This is the oldest one, I think. This is from the 1870s and 80s. It's a Singer, And you look at it, it looks like a piece of junk. It is solid cast iron, it's heavy. And it's been beat up, it was probably taken out of somebody's trash or ready to throw. It was probably thrown in the back of the barn. I found a sewing machine in the back of a corn crib.
Oh, no.
Yeah, in the farm next to us. Oh no, I found the cabinet and the sewing machine was back by the machinery. You know, back where they have all that old machinery from days gone by, just in the backyard, or back of the woodshed type of thing. And the machine was there. Should have grabbed it, but I didn't. I didn't own it either. It had a distinctive black. Down in the corner is an example of it. You guys should probably move. Is an example of it. It had beautiful gold leaf on it. In the middle is, this bar here is for the tension on the machine. Can't see it very well. And this one in the corner was portable. This one that's there's no way it was portable. It probably went into a nice, well, it's got that screw there, so maybe it was, but it's a heavy machine. Okay. Then we come to the New England style, and some of these old machines are just so darn cute. This is an unknown manufacturer, probably a white brand or made by Charles Raymond. There's no serial numbers, no identification on it. Probably some of those wanting to dodge patents. And this was in the 1860s and 70s. I'm sorry, this might be the oldest one. It's a hand crank model, which means you turn the crank and it makes a chain stitch. It has a walking presser foot. There's no feed dogs in it. Makes a chain stitch. So here's the tape of it. You hear it? You hear that steady hum? It runs really well. We should try threading it.
How could you actually sew and you have to run?
Okay, this went in a cave. This went in a on a table. It had to be nailed down. I mean, there's no way that you could run it. It's heavy, but it's too light to do that. I'm holding it down, and it also gives you a feeling of the size of it with my hand there. It just kind of sounds good, doesn't it? Okay, so those are the chain machines that we have. Transverse shuttle machines, remember that's the one that goes back and forth by Elias Howe. This is by Grover and Baker, and remember that Grover and Baker was one of the cartel. And this is an industrial model, and this thing is heavy. It was used mainly for carriage work, for harnesses, and it looks industrial. These were manufacturers from the 1850s to early 1876. This one I think is 1867. They're home sewing machine. On the bottom, I got under there like a mechanic, and it's Grover and Baker was cast into the iron below. I guess I have to use this, not my finger. And this is just a picture of one in good condition.
So all of these are at the museum.
Yep, all of them are at the museum. Okay, so to me, that one intrigued me. But as I said, Grover and Baker made home sewing machines. This is not in the museum. This is just a picture. But look how tiny it was. And they just sat on top of a chest of drawers, and the ladies would take them and sew on them. And they're just cute. If you go to Wyoming to their Historical Society Museum, they have quite a few of these over there. They have a whole room. Well, we do too. Isn't that something? Okay, then we come to the Gritsner Model GG, and it has a fiddle base on it. The fiddle base just means that it was a curved bed that looked like a fiddle. This one was less common in the United States. It was made in Germany. And the Gritsner Sewing Company is now owned by Pfaff, and they are still based in Germany. And Germany, of course, you know, are known for their fine engineering. and sturdiness and the old German work ethic. This is the Howe sewing machine. It's a replica of what was made in 1846. No, it's newer than that. This one was made in 1870. I believe that it was a demonstration model. Oh, if the story comes right, Singer had a big display of machines at the World's Fair in Chicago, and the Howe sewing machine didn't. So they had this little one right next to it that talked about the first sewing machine, and I believe this was one of them. And these are mostly, they're all treadles, pretty much. I'll let you know when they're not. But you can see the base of it says Howe Emco Manufacturing Company. This medallion is what tells you it's a replica model. And look at that single feed. Can you see it down in the corner? It's just a little hole, so you have to be precise. And all I could think of was, how many needles am I going to break with that foot? Because I had some feet I was doing some stuff with little holes, and yeah, I broke needles. But you know, with sewing, you gotta let the machine feed it through. Don't pull it. That's a student comment. So, and there were no zigzag machines back then. Okay, so those are the three of the transverse shuttle ones. Now we move into the next improvement, which is the vibrating shuttle machine. And if you remember, that's the one that goes back and forth. So this is the household sewing machine. Oh, I'm going to back up. I was talking with Diane Barr, and she said she learned to sew on her grandmother's treadle machine. And she said you just get your feet going and you go in a rhythm and it just goes. And it's got to be one of the most meditative things ever. Because it's just a constant sound, and if you're doing it right, it's just like that was. But they only made one machine, and they marketed under the Household brand. This one is up in the corner, and it has a beautiful cover. It was made by the Household. It was formerly the Providence Machine Company in Rhode Island. It was an engineering firm. And it was innovative. The shuttle was easier with the vibrating shuttle. And it was a marvel of simplicity as it was advertised. They were known for elegant furniture, and a lot of these treadle machines had beautiful cabinets with them, or treadle machines. It had a decorative nickel cover. Now most of these machines did have a cover for that, and you could either slide them over or they were screwed down tight. And what that did was it exposed the mechanism in there so you could oil it. Antique machines needed to be oiled every day. That is not the case now because they have iron and metal that will keep it in it, but you still need to oil machines. And so that was a big deal, or it freezes up and your machine will not work. Yeah, just a story. I learned to sew when I was 10. 10. And I suppose I 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade, somewhere in there, 1970 or 72. Anyway, my grandmother had bought a new machine, and they took me to Clinton every week to learn the lessons on it. So I had this Kenmore machine, which was a new machine that I had. At this point, I think my grandmother was gone, and Mom had the machine. And so anyway, Lucille Deppie brought an old machine she had bought on a sale to the 4-H meeting. And she took it all apart, and she proceeded to show us how to clean a sewing machine, how to oil a machine, how to put it back together, all of those things. So what did I do? I went home and took Mom's Kenmore apart, and I cleaned it, and I oiled it. And Mom told me later that at this point, she came down in the basement, saw that I had all the parts layered over the library table, which is what I sewed on, and she turned around and went back upstairs. Now, any of you who know my mother, that had to be hard. But I got it all put together, and it worked great. I only ran into trouble with that first machine I told you. I tried to fix it when we lived in the Des Moines area. and I got it too tight, and I took it to the machine, and he said, "You did fine, except those screws are too tight, because it still needs to vibrate around the bobbin." So every mistake is a learning opportunity. So anyway, I think this one is really cute too. This is the tension. The machine went from the or the thread spool through the tension and down through, probably came down here and down through the take-up lever, which is there. And they stuck out more in those days out to the side, which I'm so glad they don't anymore. And down through the needle. So this was the household machine. The domestic model was the domestic sewing machine. It was acquired by White Sewing Machine in 1924. Now it again is a fiddle base. It was manufactured from 1863 to 1878. I have the 1880s there. I couldn't get an exact date on this. It would involve making a phone call, and I really stall on that. It had a pre-1890 bobbin winder, which is here. And the purpose of a bobbin winder was to wind those little things precisely so it has the right tension and to stop the needle from going up and down. Wear and tear on your needle and machine. So those were pretty darn good. And this came from the instruction manual. It says, "The mechanism and operation of the domestic are so simple that if the directions here are given are carefully followed, no other instruction is necessary." Probably written by men. That didn't sew. Yeah, we all know better. So this is the Singer Model 27, 1900, manufactured April 2nd. This is from Singer's database that I was telling you about. This one happened to be $250 new, I found. That would be $3,000 today.
Wow.
So don't tell me that they didn't have expensive sewing machines back then. But this was a workhorse. They're still being used. Below is the Model 15, which is the industrial version, and that's not in our museum. But if you can see it, I just want to point out that it has that cylinder. Quite a few of the machines in the industrial do have this kind, so you can take sleeves around it, so you can do cuffs, and there's not much room. Sorry.
Happy Friday.
Okay, nobody usually calls me. Okay, so then we have another Singer 27. It's over in another section. This one was made in 1906. These two machines represent Singer's first vibrating shuttle machine. It was treadle, and it was a workhorse, as were most of them. Today, it's precise. It makes really nice straight stitching. This one has a gold Sphinx decal, and it's the most recognizable and popular, but they had several different decals, and a lot of the value is how good these decals are, and because they wore off. These machines were used, and they had Greek key ones with Greek, and they had one with the Sphinx on it, and they had leaves, and they had about 10 different decals that they put on them, and they were gold, and they looked really spectacular. The National Eldridge Model P. This is by the National Sewing Company in Belvedere. This was also a Ford plant there, so they had great engineers there. It had a swing bobbin winder. Getting lower on time here. The National Sewing Company was eventually bought by Janome, and Janome is a Japanese-based company, and they make some of the best sewing machines on the market. I want to buy one. They have sergers that air thread. That's another story. Yeah, and on the next one you see a picture of the diagram, and then over here, that is the swinging bobbin right there. And it comes out, and it hooks in, and I didn't take time to figure it out, but it actually stops the hand wheel too, and then it just No, the hand wheel has to go. But anyway, it's swung into place and swung out. And the dial there, I do believe, is a stitch length. Because on my Singer Featherweight, I gotta speed up here. So the rotary hook machines. This is the White family rotary. It was extremely well made. It was manufactured up to World War II, and then they moved the manufacturing to Japan. It was by the White sewing machine so this one would be in between 1884 and 1893. Singer Model 62, it's used today still. Very popular domestic. It has a long machine bed, so you can roll up quilts and put on it, all those bulky overalls. It's really long. It's like today's long arm sewing machines. This is a Singer Model 99. It's a 3/4 size made in 1924. It is portable, one of the first portable ones, not to be confused with the Singer Featherweight. This was much earlier. The reverse lever was added in the 1930s. National had one in 1910 to 1920, but it wasn't heavily marketed. And of course, like everything else, these things were used in industrial sewing before they came to the home market. But in 1937, Singer heavily marketed that and electric machines. Now before that, treadle machines could be electrified. They added a motor and put another belt on it and took the treadle pedal off. I had one, but in my infinite wisdom of youth, I took it all apart. What do you do? I can't tell my younger self anything, apparently. So this is probably the reverse as well. It's you go up for reverse and down for forward. This is the White Rotary Model 43. It has a crinkle finish on it. That became popular in the 40s and the 50s. It has a light on it. It has a rotary hook. We might be starting to get to some that you recognize now. Because this one is another White rotary. It's portable. This is in the corner back there, and it was the best of that line. It has a lot. Oh, my grandmother also owned one. Her portable machine is like a suitcase. You put the top up and you can just carry it like a suitcase. It's that plastic suitcase material, and it's bright aqua. So here's the attachments that come with it. These are buttonhole templates. It goes around and around. Those are on the Featherweight. A ruffling foot, hemming foots, an narrow hammer. And this supposedly had a fork design, and that would be this. And I'm not sure how that was so much innovated, because this was a rabbit hole the whole way through. And I had to pull myself out. Then this is a Free Westinghouse Model E. The Free sewing machine was next to the Westinghouse plant, and so they would make the sewing machines and send it over to Westinghouse to be electrified. It's gold or bronze. And it's supposed to have a circular badge on the back side, but this one does not have that. So this is a Singer Model 1591 variant. And it just looks like a chubby little sewing machine. It has an internal potted direct drive motor with no belt. A lot of these had a belt between the motor and the back side. Made in 1933. This is one I have in my basement. This one was actually made in Great Britain. Reva was my grandfather's second wife, and she was a Canadian citizen. So she has a green Singer, made in 1950, and that's as far as I got on this one. But it has a little light that's like a little spotlight here on the back. I remember watching her sew and fix things on this one. I'm going to pop ahead to this one. This is a Kenmore from 1954. This is the oldest one. And does it not look like 1960? I mean, it looks like a bullet. It's sleek. It's contemporary looking. And this is made by Sears, likely made by White, Murausen, or Soryu in Japan. Straight stitch and reverse lever. So, yeah. But this is the Singer Featherweight, which is the gold standard portable sewing machine that is still highly collectible today. They are so in use by quilters. It makes a precision stitch. Its foot is exactly 1/4 wide. It had a carrying case. It only weighs 11 pounds in the case. So, oh, I wanted to send this around. This is, it goes together in a square. It's all the accessories for the Singer 27, and this one's from my basement, and you can see the bobbins there. There's some regular bobbins in there. These are the bobbins for the shuttles. These are the bobbins that are used in machines today. And I took some things out, but sewing machine and button boxes tend to accumulate everything. I actually found a tooth with roots on it in a button box that I bought. And that was at school, so the kids all went, ugh. So my mother got a sewing machine for a wedding present from her grandmother, Alice Nicholson. And somewhere I have the card, the wedding card with the bill in it for $100. And I obviously put it somewhere safe because I could not find it. I do that a lot.
What year would that have been?
This one was made in 1958.
Wow.
Or 1956. So they got married in 1958. And the case has a little thing for you know, the screwdriver and everything else. And there's all kinds of information on it. So I bought the book, and I got it out a couple years ago and boiled it, but I didn't stitch with it. So the Singer is actually opposite of other brands of the old ones. When you put it forward, instead of backwards to do it, you thread the needle from the outside. But you are all welcome to look at this. I mean, it's really tiny. It goes everywhere. And yeah, take a look at it. This is the button holder. I can actually show you how it works, but we won't do that now, with the little template thingies. And yes, I made buttonholes with it. I learned how to sew on this one the first time. Barbie doll clothes. Not a good idea to make Barbie doll clothes first. They're just too little. 1/8" seam allowances. So then we have some toy machines. This one's by Gateway Engineering. It's a child educational toy. Simple chain stitch, hand crank. This one is a chain stitch, battery operated. This one would have been made in 1960, made in Japan. Little Stitcher was also called the Little Betty, Betsy Ross, Sew Right, and it was hand crank and made a chain stitch by TG Metal Industries, and that was just one manufacturer of these. The KD Sewmaster, 1944 to 1955. These were produced in Germany after World War II. It has a hand crank, it's red painted metal, and it's collectible. And I don't know the value of one that's in perfect condition, but they aren't used for sewing, as none of these toys really are. But highly collectible. So just some quick dates. 1873, Helen Blanchard invented the zigzag. But it was only used in industrial machines. In 1877, the crochet stitch and overlocking were made and used in industrial machines. These were the forerunners of the home sergers. 1893, Swiss developed a hem stitch, and the hem stitch is that one that goes like, kind of like a ladder, I believe. It's used in heirloom sewing. But that company eventually became Bernina, which is probably the best sewing machine made on the market. It has, the only thing that stopped me is that they have proprietary feet, whereas all the other machines use the same feet. So if you buy a foot for my Viking machine, I can't use it on a Bernina, and sometimes I get way too practical. So Bernina's not going to be in my wheelhouse. But it is in other people's, and it's awesome. 1934 to 1978, decorative and utility stitches, upgrades added throughout then, all kinds of things were added. But nothing really major until 1978, until Singer announced a computer-controlled sewing machine. And Brothers Sewing Machine Company followed in 1979. Of course, I got one in the 90s. So, overlock machines and sergers. This is just some new developments. They came into home sewing in 1980. I bought a baby lock that was just a workhorse, 3-thread serger, absolutely loved it. Well, it got dry and I couldn't get it oiled, so it went to the sewing machine cemetery. But oh, that was an awesome machine. But with sergers, if any of you have them, they're tricky to thread. And you gotta get in there with tools, and if you get one step wrong, it won't stitch. Well, Janome came up with air threading. So you just put it in there, you push a button, it goes whoosh, all the way through. If I count up on this second serger I've had for 30 years, 25, if I count up all the hours of frustration with threading that thing, that will pay for my new air thread. I went to Kathy Haberkamp and I used to go to sewing shows and things like that. We'd go to these things, and one of the ladies was demonstrating sergers. This was in the 90s when they were still new, and she said, what do men do when they don't have the right tool? Well, yeah, they stop, they drive 15 miles to town, buy the right tool, and come back and fix it, right? So she said, you need a serger. So I said, okay. Well, I wasn't back 2 weeks, and Lester comes in and he says, boy, that sure goes easier with the right tool. I had a sewing machine the next 2 weeks. I need a serger. Literally, well, it might not have been 2 weeks, but I went and looked and I got one. So stitches, of course, zigzag is taken for granted now. The stretch stitches on knits, there's so many varieties of that. Decorative stitches are crazy. Home embroidery machines, you can buy a simple embroidery machine that will do small things with regular thread for, well, it was about $600, $800. It's probably more now. That was when I bought Megan's 20 years ago. No, probably 15. Some machines come with a wider needle plate. Instead of 6 millimeters, it's 7. I guess people really like that. I didn't see the value, so I don't know one. There's so many, you can get a foot to do anything. Edge stitching, hem stitching. I just won't even go there. You saw the variety in the older machines, and there's more. You can drop the feed dog, so you can do free motion. You can sew on buttons with the machine. And some machines will go multi-directional, omnidirectional, where they go 8 ways. The feed dogs are that complicated. Yeah, I didn't get one of those either, even when I had the opportunity. And I guess the latest one that I found is there's a robotic sewing arm that will make an entire t-shirt, which is leaning toward robots making entire garments. Japanese machines are Juki, Janome, Singer, and Baby Lock. All excellent machines. Singers have come a long way. The ones I had in my classroom in the 80s were workhorses. They could sew anything. They were awesome. But then they kind of went down, and I think they're coming back now, but the other 3 are top-notch. Pfaff is, these are all good. Pfaff, Husqvarna, that's what I own, and Bernina's are made in Europe, Germany, Sweden, and Switzerland. And the USA only makes industrial machines now. The Union Special Company, Atlas USA, and American Sewing Corp. And specialized machines for bags are made in the United States as well. So just here's some pictures of some modern sewing machines. The one is $15,000, but I think it'll make your bed. It's a long arm quilting machine, and they are long, and you can get a lot of quilts in there. You can do free-form sewing.
Oh, wow.
You can do embroidery on it. I mean, it will do everything. And then on the left is a less expensive one, about $2,400. This is just basic embroidery machine that's not real fancy. So, the journey of the sewing machine. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And there's just so much information out there and so much to share. And anyway, I hope you look at sewing machines with kind of an awe and reverence to them, because without them, think where we'd be today. So, anyway, thank you.
That was awesome, and I want to thank Nancy. Many of the, okay, Nancy, she has a question.
I have a question. I was at a sewing get-together last Saturday. There was a lady that said she is going to get a pink a sewing machine. That I'm pretty sure it's very similar to that. And I was so surprised that they would come in colors too.
Well, I saw that, and I'm not sure they did come in colors. They may have after 1950, because I showed you that one Singer that was green. That was made in Great Britain.
Okay.
So I'm not sure I saw them. Some of them are painted, I think they might have.
Oh, okay. That was it. I thought.
But Singer was always a black one.
Yes, yes.
Kind of like Ford.
Now, they do have a little bit larger featherweights than that. Right.
I've seen that, yeah, they do.
But I had to tell you this. I mean, here's colored sewing machine.
Well, Marilyn Dean brings hers every month for Days for Girls Sewing. So, yeah. And, oh, yeah, they are sought after.
So many of the sewing machines that you saw up here were from our collection.
Most of them. I
Most
pointed
of
out
them.
when they weren't. Maybe
So-
someday they will, I don't know. We'll
So
see.
be sure and come and look at that. We need to thank Pat Gent for the wonderful display of sewing machines we have upstairs.
And Marcella, she was...
And Marcella Haneke, you're right, she did a wonderful job. Now we need to decide how we can keep Nancy up there, so when people come through, she can explain.
I'm going to print and laminate these and put them by the
Okay.
machines.
Anyway, that was a wonderful job. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.